You're doing a play about two Jews who are producing a flop instead of a hit, knowing they can make more money with a flop. And the big number in it is Springtime for Hitler. Yeah, you're going to get the money. That was the beginning, the outrageous spark of what would later be remembered as one of the most daring comedies ever put on screen. And at the center of all that lunacy stood Mel Brooks, a man who worked more than 60 years crafting some of the all-time great comedies. Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, The Producers, Spaceballs. He forged a legacy of humor that touched generations, making his mark not just on movies, but on the very fabric of comedy. He collaborated with scores of actors, stars, legends, and unknowns, and many of them he loved. He excelled at working collaboratively, he coaxed genius out of his actors, and he had a talent for filling his life with individuals who made his vision better. But in a career as long and rich as his, not everyone in his world was welcome. A few actors battled against his rhythm, defied his authority, or hurt the tender trust that he cherished most. Brooks was not a man to yell on set or throw tantrums in the media. He was not loud. He did not rant. What he did was recall. He recalled each conflict, each ego, each time someone believed they were larger than the movie itself. And as soon as that line was crossed, once that trust was shattered, you were out of there for good. In this tale, we reveal 6 actresses Mel Brooks openly disliked working with, the battles, the tension, the silent snubs, and the names he silently blacklisted from his films. And believe me, number 3 will totally shock you. The first is Gene Wilder. Some betrayals do not come with slammed doors or angry phone messages. Some come quietly with a shrug, a no, and a silence that lasts for years. For Mel Brooks, it came from Gene Wilder, the one man he never believed he would lose. Wilder was not just another actor in Brooks's movies. He was Brooks's mirror, his rhythm, his ideal comedic twin. Together they blew up Hollywood with The Producers, reset the standard for satire with Blazing Saddles, and wrote a gothic classic with Young Frankenstein. They didn't make films, they made history. Collaborating together seemed effortless, like two jazz saxophonists improvising in complete harmony, creating crescendos that everyone else couldn't hope to match. But when the camera cut on Young Frankenstein, so did the harmony. Wilder had given his heart and soul to that script, crafting the words, the beats, the very pulse of the movie. Brooks battled the studio to retain it in black and white, directed it with verve bordering on fanaticism, and together they achieved the impossible. It ought to have marked the start of their greatest chapter. Instead, it was the end. The breakdown occurred in the guise of another script, Wilder's, the venture of Sherlock Holmes's brighter brother. Wilder had penned it. He desired to perform in it. He desired to direct it. And above all, he desired Brooks to support him, to produce it, to have faith in him as Brooks had insisted on having faith in him. But Brooks would not. Gene wasn't ready to direct. Brooks afterwards conceded. He thought he was. I knew he wasn't. That one sentence put the knife in deeper than any critic's review. To Wilder, it was more than doubt. It was betrayal. I thought Mel was my partner. Wilder once told a friend, partners don't walk away when it matters most. So Wilder went on without him. He brought in Marty Feldman, he cast Madeline Kahn, he redrew the same family that had made Young Frankenstein a miracle except Mel. What he was left with was a movie that flickered with charm but never caught fire like their previous magic. The timing was off, the spark was less bright, and the absence of Brooks loomed over every scene like a shadow. Brooks, unnecessarily the observer, served up his best line in private. It was like watching your brother packing up and moving out of the house, except he took your good joke with him. What transpired was not a shouting brawl. There were no tabloids, no poison, only silence. For years, the men who used to finish each other's sentences did not speak to one another. Hollywood took notice. Friends gossiped, but Brooks and Wilder did not reopen the wound in public. They bore it in silence, the way comedians will sometimes bear their greatest sorrow behind the jokes. Time, as it has a way of doing, mellowed the corners. Years afterwards, at a random occurrence, they encountered each other. No fireworks, no organized reunion, just a handshake, a joke, or two exchanged like old money, and then later something like friendship anew. But something broke that never mended. They never collaborated again, not out of anger, but because once lost, trust is not easily regained. Brooks subsequently admitted, "Gene was the only actor I ever trusted with my uncooked ideas. I could give him a half-cooked scene, and he'd complete it as if he already knew the conclusion. After Smarter Brother, I couldn't do that anymore." Wilder, in turn, never disparaged Brooks. He sustained the warmth in interviews, once referring to him as the funniest man I've ever known, the brother I got to choose. But even in that warmth, there was the slight resonance of what was lost. By the time Wilder died in 2016, Brooks's sadness was clear. On stage, he wept, confessing, "I can't get used to the fact that he's not with us anymore. He filled my heart with such happiness." Whatever space had hung in the air dissolved in the presence of finality. Ultimately, their tale wasn't one of hate. It was one of trust, established, lost, and grieved. To the world, they were the perfect couple. Behind the veil, they were two men who loved each other enough to hurt one another deeply. And for Mel Brooks, Gene Wilder's scar never wore off. Because occasionally the man who can make you laugh the most is the one capable of breaking your heart. The second name is Frank Langella. There are actors who don't lose roles, they lose directors. Such happened to Frank Langella when he met Mel Brooks. Langella was a dream candidate on paper. He had already bedded Broadway as Dracula, tall, magnetic, imbued with Shakespearean gravity. To the trade, he was Dracula, but not to Mel Brooks. He wasn't doing gothic tragedy. He didn't care about candlelit monologues or smoldering glances. He was doing Dracula, dead and loving it, a movie where the Count should trip on a candelabra immediately after reciting a monologue. From the very first rehearsal, there was tension in the air. Brooks operated his sets like a circus, loud, improvisational precision chaos. Langella, however, walked in as if reprising Hamlet. He spoke his lines with gravitas, treating jokes as scripture. He wasn't playing Dracula. Brooks later joked to a friend. He was auditioning for sainthood. Brooks attempted to steer him in the other direction. Notes, jokes, gentle suggestions, it didn't matter. Langella listened, then went back to his marble statue act. The seasoned cast, hardened by Brooks's slapstick and hyperpaced universe, stiffened. Crew members whispered among themselves, "Is this an opera or a comedy?" Momentum crumbled under the pressure of Langella's pauses. One moment clinched the break. At a test read, Brooks gave Langella a new gag, a dramatic build-up leading to a pratfall. Langella blinked stonily and demanded, "Do you want me to ridicule the text?" Brooks glared for a beat and then snapped, "No, I want you to get through it." That was it. By the end of the week, Langella was gone. No pouting, no shouting match, just swift replacement. In came Leslie Nielsen. To Brooks, Nielsen was the ideal foil, a guy who could do everything with solemn seriousness, but in a manner that spurred the comedy rather than drowning it. The pretext was creative differences, but the insiders saw the reality. Brooks wasn't going to wrestle a Shakespearean monument into slapstick. Langella never slammed Brooks in public. He cut out of the project and remained mum. But behind closed doors, he allegedly wrote off the experience as a circus I had no interest in joining. Brooks, on his part, never once named Langella when talking about the movie. Instead, when questioned about Dracula, dead and loving it, he would say one word about Nielsen. Perfect. Their tracks never met again. Brooks never spoke ill of Langella, but his silence spoke volumes. In his universe, actors either raised the madness to greater heights or were devoured by it. Langella arrived wearing a crown, but Brooks wasn't creating royalty. He was creating anarchy. And in his world, you had to adore the descent. The third moniker is Chevy Chase. This will shock many. Mel Brooks possessed a talent for seeing rhythm before the first laugh ever fell. To him, comedy was a dance. Partners trading steps, counting on each other not to fall behind the beat. One guy receives the setup, the other receives the punchline, then you swap, then you split. That beat enabled his movies to sing. With Chevy Chase, Brooks knew it at once. The beat was off. Studios continued to nudge Chase towards him throughout the 1980s and early 90s. He was in hot water. Saturday Night Live, Fletch Vacation. He had the smirk, box office clout, the sort of name a studio could place on a poster and promise a gross. On paper, he was the ideal candidate for Brooks's style of spoof. But Brooks shot it down every time. Why? Because Chase violated what Brooks regarded as comedy's first commandment, generosity. He's not acting. Brooks once explained to a casting director, waiting for everyone else to shut up so he can demonstrate he's the brightest in the room. To Brooks, Chase had been a sniper. Keen, swift, frequently lethal humor, but always from a distance. He didn't cooperate. He competed. The nearest they came to a collaboration was Spaceballs. Chase was mentioned as a possibility for Dark Helmet. He had the voice. He had the deadpan delivery. But Brooks scarcely blinked. He needed Rick Moranis. Rick knows when to step aside, Brooks later said. Chevy only knows how to interrupt. It had nothing to do with star power for Brooks. It was about chemistry. And chemistry, he felt, could not coexist with ego. In private, Brooks characterized Chase as someone who crashed into comedy rather than dance with it. He liked the raw talent, but not the way it arrived. The constant smirk, the irony that undermined sincerity, those were warning signs. In Mel's universe, no gag was too ridiculous as long as you were going for it. You had to mean it. Chevy, in Brooks' opinion, never did mean it. There was one meeting between them, a short, awkward, forgettable one. Afterward, Brooks was quoted as smiling graciously and saying, "Maybe in another universe." Chase didn't contest. He didn't insist. He just turned away. That world never arrived. Chase himself never mounted a counterattack. But in subsequent interviews, when questioned about directors that he never worked with, he slipped in a revealing comment. Some guys want you to play by their rules. I make my own. Friends of his describe it as not bitterness, but pride. Brooks was a control freak in Chase's eyes. Chase was chaos masquerading as confidence in Brooks' eyes. The feud never burst into headlines because, in reality, it never had to. Brooks didn't blacklist him. He just left him out. Not out of malice, but out of habit. In Mel Brooks's world, comedy was holy. Timing was more important than fame, and trust was most important of all. To this day, there's no redemption tale, no last-in-life handshake, but two men who orbited the same sphere, but never touched. Brooks still talks of trust and ensemble. Chase still has the image of a great, but troublesome loner. And perhaps that's the silent conclusion. Mel Brooks didn't dislike Chevy Chase enough to fight with him, he just didn't trust him enough to ever allow him in.